Hey, good day, people. Hope everyone is well. So, I just got back from the National Communication Association convention and really had quite a great time. Saw so many old friends, heard amazing sessions, really just engaged in so many different discussions on such a wide range of topics that it's easy to be like, deeply invigorated from it. And I mean, I think sometimes you get some of that from YouTube if you get yourself in a particular exchange that seems to really be meeting people all the way along, where you're able to track arguments carefully and people are listening, and then they begin by going, is this what you're saying? And you kind of lay it out and they go, well, here's the other. And it really does move it forward. It's not the ships passing in the night that I think happens more often here, or and it's not multimedia visual slams of arguments without engagement, but it's just face-to-face engagement and over issues. There are so many different things I wanted to talk about. One would be, I guess, I do want to return to this issue, and this would be a little bit for Matt, thou art that, who he and I were talking about, I guess, the question of what, if any, are the spaces between something like a pantheism, panpsychism on the one hand, and then an eliminative materialism on the other? And is it the case that it's either of those, or does emergentism not just wash back into one or the other, or what does one mean by an emergentist position? And the thing that I've tried to say, and I coughed out something in a pretty poor form. I was rushed, and I just felt like it was overly complex and was not saying what I wanted to say. And I made it private, and maybe I'll put a link to it down here. I don't think it's that good of a video, so I'm not against necessarily anything I said, but I don't think it's that good of a video. The issue that I would want to say, just to hopefully make it clear here, and I'll be brief about it, is to say I think there is a space, and I've said it before, right? What you postulate is this fact, and the fact is the universe at some place in some way just appears as fact to people, and its origin, this becomes the question of, where did it come from? What is its nature? And, how are we best to understand that and account for it? And I think one doesn't need to say in any way that there was a creator God, that there was a sentient being discrete from the created who initiated a series of events that caused the universe, brought it into being, yada yada. Nor do I think one has to say that it was nothingness and then just a blind fluke occurrence that without any motivation from nothing came something, and then in that something, just as a fluke and as a happenstance, whatever those words, fluke and happenstance, would mean in a deterministic universe, life just sort of emerged. And life admittedly may have come out of a process of emergence, despite the fact that all of the universe is deterministic. See, I think that's the sort of eliminativist materialist position. And then the panpsychic position, I think, is sort of this: there was this sentient being there at the beginning of the universe who now is, I don't know, in some way behind it all, participating in it, is a co-interlocutor with beings in the world. It's sort of the cosmic backdrop behind everything. I also think, unfortunately, this is for Matt especially, that as much as one might try to give a panpsychic position strictly from a scientific position, so many people hear it and they're listening for what they're going to take to be evidence that there could be an afterlife. And I've said on multiple occasions, I'm just not interested in going there. So here would be the argument that I would give between those two positions. Okay, so first you just postulate this fact of existence, I'm sorry, this fact of the universe comes into being. I don't know what that is, where it comes from. I think we have to take that as the given. From that given, the universe, not yet life, just the universe. The universe is characterized by an orderliness. Now, this orderliness was not created by design. It was not done by a sentient designer. It isn't the orderliness itself is not sentient, and it's not a being. It's the particular kind of relations between the things that are. But the orderliness is not itself not a thing. The orderliness is intelligent, even though it is not sentient. That is, the universe is an intelligent universe, and by intelligence I mean the very orderliness that is omnipresent in the cosmos. Now, if somebody says, well, in the cosmos, how much do we know of our little tiny sample? Well, that's sort of what we're going on. And if I'm overextending, I'd go, yeah, okay, well, we have to be very careful about what we mean by how universal are things like laws of gravity, speed of light. There are different physical laws that I think many people want to say apply universally throughout the cosmos. At any rate, I think just stick with there is an orderliness to the cosmos. That orderliness is intelligent, and that very orderliness naturally, inevitably precipitates life. Now, we only have evidence right here of life on Earth. The life that we know is this life that's been here for whatever, 4 or 5 billion years. In the same way, I guess, that we don't know about the universality of the universal, what we take to be universal laws here, we don't know about the universality of life. We don't know to what extent it exists elsewhere, how it could be defined elsewhere, what would the likelihood would have to be for there to be. Now, many people, I think we all know, would say, given the space, what's the Drake equation? There are different ways that people can say that life is very likely to be elsewhere if you had the resources to scour and to really look. Now, that itself is debatable. I again would say, look, you just go with the argument that it couldn't have not been, now that it is. It's not that it was necessary from the beginning. It's that the metaphysical possibilities had to have been there for it to be, and now that it is, it couldn't have not been. So, I think the language is we need to be very precise about how it would be said. But to that extent, once a person admits, and this would be the summary, once a person admits that the universe is an intelligent orderliness that precipitates naturally life, those emergent properties of homeostasis, of the ability to incorporate forms of energy which are not simply like dispersed and driven by Newtonian mechanics. You have to have things that have boundaries and membranes that allow for an internal store of energy, everything from the way that food and sleep relate to organisms, and the strategic ways that they can use sleeping up or having a meal or not having a meal for calculated energy distribution at later places, later times. This is part of the dynamics of being alive. Living organisms, they require an intake of various kinds of materials, and then they have to expulse those materials. They have an exchange with their environment just to maintain their inner state. A very simple example would be the mammals or warm-blooded animals who have an increasing caloric demand just to regulate internal temperature. I mean, not just cellular density and all the different things that are involved in keeping one's body in its size. I mean, you have to ingest a great amount of food just to keep your body at its actual size. But also, when you start to get to the difference between cold-blooded and warm-blooded, now again, different kinds of nutrients need to be, different amounts need to be brought in and distributed for different functions throughout that internal system. You don't find that in the inorganic. The inorganic's energy is, it's maybe locked up at atomic levels and things like this, but it's not an intake and an output through semi-permeable boundaries within a living system, right? The closest thing, I guess, that you could get to that are things like candles. Candle is it appears to be an open system, like a living system, but it's really just a closed, well, it is an open system, but it's still caught in chemical properties that show what an open system would look like if it weren't yet alive. Life has all of the other dimensions of, having birth and DNA and all the different kind of dynamics that we think of it. But a candle itself, unlike Newtonian mechanics, an object, just subject to laws of physics, but a candle, it can expand depending on the airflow, once it's ignited, and depending upon the particular kind of wick and the particular substance that the candle is made of, and it grows and it can shrink and it experiences a kind of lifespan, and it literally needs an intake of outer material in order for its own continuance, and it gives off, gas wastes and, particulate matter, and it, in that sense, is much different than, something like a pen, which I guess we could talk about something, again, maybe like atomic decay, but it's not requiring material for its own sustenance. All right, so I think that would really be it. I don't know why people can't see the obvious middle position between eliminativist materialism and a panpsychism. Yeah, you don't need a panpsychism, something like that. No, the consciousness emerges within life. So life happens as a natural precipitate from an orderliness that just pervades the cosmos. I don't know why. The cosmos is orderly in a certain way. That very orderliness doesn't have to be sentient, doesn't have to be a creator or a designer. It doesn't have to be sentient. That orderliness just needs to be recognized as the intelligence that it is. It's an intelligent universe. The orderliness equals intelligence. And once people get that through their heads, all of the crazy dogma, all the religious whoop-de-doos and the so-and-sos go out the window. But that doesn't mean you slip into the none of this matters, it's all just a fluke, because it's all just blind mechanical material forces that, no blind, no mechanical, no forces. No, there's an orderliness that's intelligent, and it naturally precipitates out life. Life is it's a manifestation of one of its ontological possibilities. That is, the orderliness itself had to have had the ontological possibility of life, and we're the proof of that. Now, if we wouldn't have been, we would never know that life could have been. But the fact that we are is the fact that we could know that the orderliness had to have had the metaphysical possibility of life. It had to have. Here we are. Can't be denied. Now, so that undercuts fluke. It doesn't even, and especially the argument that life is a fluke is a real problem for people who want to maintain something like a hard line eliminativist materialist, which also is a determinism. How could everything be just eliminatively materialist, deterministic forces, and then say the word fluke or claim that life could have not emerged? It doesn't make sense. No, it had to have emerged from that position. And again, it had to have emerged, but just with no purpose, no consequence. It's just doing whatever it's doing, but it's really nothing. Which, I mean, machine and mechanistic metaphors are the dumbest thing ever when people try to talk about the cosmos. Machine just doesn't work. First, machines are created with purposes in view. So the universe was not a machine. People, the life, the organic that emerges out of the intelligent orderliness, that is not a machine either. Machines do not heal their own wounds. They do not grow. They do not need nutrients. They do not metabolize and exchange gases with their environments. They do not have semi-permeable boundaries that they use to make micro exchanges with pheromones with their environment. They don't need a space and a territory in which to rove. The number of comparisons by which machines are just not organisms and organisms are not machines, it could be made endlessly, and only people who are inattentive to language and its metaphorical power could just be blind to that. The point would be that there is an intelligent orderliness, and it pervades the cosmos. I don't know why. Somehow it's the given. It took billions of years, many billions, at least as we know. It could have happened earlier somewhere else. We have no idea. But here, it took billions and billions and billions of years for, I don't know, it could have come from elsewhere. It could have happened here spontaneously through a happenstance at micro levels, but life emerged, right? The molecular possibilities of, very likely, of virus-like structures that had RNA forms were here, and through some odd form, some hybrid combination of a DNA happened, some double helix happened, and it then allowed for almost, what, 1 billion years of single-cell, microbiotic, protists, prokaryotic life of grow and divide, grow and divide. Nothing that anyone could know of as sex. Nothing like Darwinian evolution of species by survival through passing off of genetic material into offspring. No offspring. Grow and divide, grow and divide. I mean, check out the Lynn Margulis stuff on this. Instead, what you get is the eukaryote invasion, about 1 billion years into life, a little less than 1 billion years into life, and multicellularity begins. The nucleated cell, one organism tries to devour another, and it unsuccessfully digests it while the other inside says, boy, I think I'd rather live inside here. And that nucleated cell and the possibility of life becoming more and more complex, more and more multicellular, it becomes an absolute explosive revolution. And sex itself is an abortive cannibalism. It's a kind of truce formed between an attempt to devour and a fail, an attempt to devour and a fail, attempt to devour and a fail, and a truce went all right. And the origin of sex down at the microbiotic level. I'm not going to I don't have time to go on. This video is going much longer than I thought. I don't have time to give a much longer video other than to say this kind of irritability that happens way down at the cellular level. It emerges with multiple levels upon levels as life becomes more and more complex, and as life grows into feeling creatures, creatures who have increased capacities for senses, and senses that can interrelate between one another, and with various forms of communication extensions, forms of tool making, of alphabetic text, of mirrors, of telescopes and microscopes and computers. People have amplified and grown into highly self-reflexive creatures who can now, they can question and interrogate what's happened to them and how they got to be where they are. I don't think that you and I, talking right here, us having this conversation, whoever's listening to this didn't come about by a blind fluke of nature, nor did it come about by some guy sitting on a throne who went, ta-da, here, have this. No, what happened was there was an intelligent orderliness. It's pervading the cosmos. One of its natural precipitates is an organism that to various degrees opens up to that environment and exchanges with that environment. And it's not as if human sentience and human, the self-reflexive consciousness that we have is something to be proud of, or this is the great accomplishment. It may not be, in many regards, more substantial or important than the whole host of other biological functions that go all the way back down to, amoebas and protists and the blind, mindless cells in your gut tissue and throughout your body. I think the point is that people, unlike those operative processes that open to the world in terms of the world's orderliness. See, I think that's part of the deal. It's not just that there is the orderliness and then there also is life as an emergent sort of symptomatic function or precipitate out of it. It's that the senses themselves, they're attuned to the orderliness in various ways. Take the electromagnetic spectrum and the different kinds of light that we see and the different ways that sound and sight and hearing can be integrated. Everything from music to paintings to sculpture and dance, cooking, the integration of all of these, they're not simply produced in the mind of a subject. It's not a Cartesian subject who represents these things because he's had a mind given to him by God, but it's not just blind survival value of an organism who's, had those characteristics of what had survival value. No, the senses are resonating and consonant with various possibilities of coming in harmony or disharmony with the world's orderliness. The world's orderliness is so robust and so rangy, so overfillingly ambiguous that culture itself comes in and almost needs to provide an anxiety buffer against the possibilities, and it gives authoritative dogmatic reads of this is food and this isn't food and this is a thing to find aesthetically pleasing but not this. All of these kinds of cultural overlay upon that they're helpful in disambiguating and we say in giving order, but the problem is that there's so much order, we need to reduce the order to the socially acceptable, sanctified orders in order to just stop from going crazy. I think, this is also why it's oftentimes very beneficial for people to travel widely, to go to different places and realize how differently people around the world engage in everything from what marriage looks like, what work looks like, what eating is, how to appreciate art, music, and dance. They all have an internal order to them, but their order isn't made out of thin human gossamer air. It's somehow hooking into the overflowing possibilities that are already a register of this order in the cosmos itself. Same with all science. Science is a human construction, and inches and yards, these are human fictions. There's no such thing as an inch short of, or a mile or a kilometer or a meter. But these things, these fictions, these inventions of science, they're the basic unit of measurement in so much science, and they're disclosing, even if they always just disclose a human's attempt to represent something, they also disclose the very orderliness that we are measuring as we're using those tools. So hope everyone is well. Take care. Bye-bye.